Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Marina Perry Podcast. I am super excited today because we're going to talk about something that you may not know a lot about, or you might be confused or have misinformation about, or you may not think you're interested in it. But I'm interested in it because I think it's a massive piece of our future. And what I know, really from life in general, is that the things that we resist that are coming anyway, we best get on board with. So I have a great friend, Rossco Paddison, who is joining us today. He is a crypto entrepreneur. He is, in my mind, just a genius nerd, if I can describe him lovingly, who really does dive deep into things. And he's actually helped tens of thousands of people, as he'll share with us today, really unpack, I suppose, the cryptocurrency world and what that is. And I have asked him today, because he's so intelligent and does so much in this space, not to dumb it down because we need that, but to dumb it down because we need that. So welcome to the show, Roscoe. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that you're passionate about liberating people around their money and their finances, and that's what I'd love us to tap into today, how you can help my listeners understand what Bitcoin and crypto and all these fancy-tancy terms are. But, you know, I know you're busy, and so I really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me on, and I'm excited for your listeners if this is their first time ever going into the subject matter. Awesome. And really to acknowledge the other people who maybe been into this subject matter before and they've potentially, had some hard lessons or anything like that too. I know this can be a revisit for some people, and especially when it comes to cryptocurrencies, there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot going on, and it moves very quickly, and all sorts of things can happen, including huge successes and failures and all sorts of stuff. So hopefully we can demystify a bunch of that today.
Yes, let's do that. Let's bring some clarity to this actually very exciting space. So my first question is, what is cryptocurrency? How did you come to become an expert in it? And, why, let's just start with that, but why is it important? But most importantly, what is it first?
So basically, if you think about computers, we've had a world for many years where we've had this new infinite resource. If I put a photo on my computer, I could copy and paste it an infinite number of times, right? So we've got this infinite space when it comes to the internet and what's possible there. But when it comes to money, that doesn't really work too well. You don't want money that you can copy and paste, because then it has all sorts of problems and inflation and being spent more than once and can't maintain its real value. So blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies kind of fixed that problem. They made it so that you couldn't copy and paste something. They made finite assets in an infinite world. So it was this cool sort of switch as to what was possible on a computer, which wasn't possible before. Is that there was only one of those particular coins or one of those things, whereas before there was infinite numbers.
Okay, so let's pause for a second, because when you say, it's taking something that's infinite and making it finite, some people go, well, why is that a good thing? And when you mentioned before, money, we don't want to be able to print money. And yet some people would argue otherwise, isn't it a good thing that we print money? And, my understanding of world economics, certainly not massively in depth, but I do understand that, 2008 financial crisis, and even really some would argue the crisis that we're right on the doorstep of right now, is due to the fact that we have just printed so much money, loaned so much money beyond really, fractional lending or whatever you would call it, should have been built for, to the point where money really has no value. Is that what you're saying? That if it is infinite, instead of being amazing, it actually means now, quote unquote, nothing, or it has no value because it's not precious in its smallness?
Yeah.
I just, just to get our head around, why is it dangerous that something can be infinite?
Right.
Is it dangerous?
So when we think about money, it's exchanging a value, right? So money's existed longer than human beings. Literally, monkeys traded bananas for sex before humans even existed. Money is.
I know this for a fact. Is there a reference for this?
I will get a reference. We can put it in the show notes. But it's literally money or transactions have existed before humans.
Barter.
Right? Yeah, barter in some way, shape, or form, right? I love how you're do we have a citation? Do we have can we source? The thing that's interesting about that is that it's always been a social contract. So when money existed even before humans, it was between a couple of animals trying to figure out some sort of dynamic in order to transact so that there was a mutual social benefit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we think about money as literally just social contracts, and we go forward through time, we had like shells were some of the first types of money, animals were the types of first money, like bartering them. And then we went on to things like metals and gold and resources. And then paper money was our most recent iteration. And then, this next iteration is cryptocurrency. Will it be the end of iterating money? No, it'll keep going beyond this, it's just the next version. It's the upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like, and the thing that was sort of constant throughout all of those times was the value was relevant at that point in time. Like when they were trading cows for money, it was relevant because it was food in that context in that time,
Mm-hmm.
like, so I perceived value and that worked well. So yeah, like that's kind of a little kind of way of answering. It's a kind of metaphorical way of answering your question, but finite resources in a digital world means we know there's only one of those coins and you can't fake it. Like it's an original, like, so you have the ability, like if it was a Rembrandt painting, we can't fake that it's existing in a digital sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it gives us perhaps more security in the value of the asset.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So then when you say it's the new iteration, it's the upgrade, how is it an upgrade to paper money? Like, and just to be clear, like when you say there's on these coins on a blockchain, like, for people listening, I mean, look, I've been a little bit exposed to the crypto world in 2017. I went in with everybody and it was amazing. It was very exciting. And of course, then it wasn't. Let's just maybe put it like that. And, I still have crypto and whatnot. So, my question is, if someone's listening, they could just be going, it all sounds very techie. Do you have to be like a coder and a tech person to understand how this money can exist online? Or do you really believe that this is going to be how money is traded and that paper money will cease to exist and that this will be the way, and therefore people should lean into this conversation?
So I'm going to answer it with a question. Like the question someone might want to explore is, would it have been useful for them to get into like IT back in the 90s? Like, and that the answer to that will be different for different individuals, and it should be, like, if they're really self-aware and looking at their own circumstances. We're early in terms of where this technology is still. Like, it's got a while to go. We're probably about the equivalent of Windows 98 right now. Like in terms of like, we're just before and it may not even be this market run that we're going on right now. It might be the one after where it really takes off and it's a global phenomena. But we're close. Like we're close to it being meaningful. So if you're like just an everyday human being with a job and a good lifestyle and stuff like that, it might be a good hedge for you to have a little stake in it and to put a tiny bit of attention on it. But for you to put all of your attention on it and there's all these other important things in your life, then maybe it's not a good use of time. Like it should just be a fraction of a fraction, right? Technology is catching up so that everybody will eventually be using it, whether they know they're using it or not. So if you think about this, right, there's this thing, like we receive emails every day, like back and forth, we receive emails, and that uses a protocol called SMTP. That's the same as like, if I, right now, the industry's saying like, we're going to use this cryptographic technology to send you money on the blockchain, right? That's like me saying to you, I'm going to use the SMTP protocol to package and send information through the ISPs so that you can receive a digital letter on your side of the screen. Like that's, the industry is quite silly at describing itself right now, but what it's doing is so fundamental to what's coming in the way of life that you'll be using it whether you know you're using it or not anyway.
Right, but it might become smoother, less clunky, and more user-friendly.
You will just see like earn interest, earn this per annum, or send money for free, or you'll see the promise of the things that you interact with the banking system right now, except the bank won't exist anymore. And there will be kind of way more creative ways to do things. There'll be little ways of doing things.
And just on that, Roscoe, like my understanding of one of the reasons that cryptocurrency is so important, or not so much important, but let's say different and quote unquote the upgrade, is because it not desensitized. I think the word is it's not, what is it? Decentralizes, not desensitized. That's hilarious. I have this habit of doing it. Anyone who listens to me enough knows that I do that. Use the similar but very different wording. Anyhow, decentralized, and to the point where, because at the moment, is it true that we have a little bit of a powerlessness, if you will, around our currency because it's controlled by, you know, a very few, you say banks or private institutions, even, you know, private institutions or whatever else that are essentially making a lot of profit on our money, but we're kind of losing or eroding the value of our money because of the structure of this fractional lending. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, in 2016, which is the last factual data, it was $13.1 trillion in middleman fees, and that's like the banking and the insurance industry, basically, right? So $13.1 trillion in just the year 2016 in fees. Now, I don't know if you know much about cash and economy and whatever, but there's not that many trillions of US dollars, for example, floating around the world. And so to have almost the exact size of the amount of cash that's in existence to be charged in fees in 1 year gives you an idea of just how much money is swallowed up by that machine. So a peer-to-peer system that enables us to cut out that middleman and take some of those profits back as people is great. But also there's a lot of other reasons why it's important. There's lots of, and I mean, not to get political, but like if you live in, say, Iran as a woman, it's very hard for you to send money because you have a lot of barriers. Like, first of all, just because you live in that country, you might be seen as a terrorist, right? Like to send money through the normal banking system. Second to that, if you're a woman living in that country, you might not be able to get a bank account just because you don't have your husband's permission, right? And so like there's all these barriers, and that's just one example of thousands of stories from different people in different countries that have banking problems or challenges that they can't overcome. Like people are we're pretty privileged in, you know, Western society with some decent financial services. And we are, however, locked down by a lot of rules that are invisible. Like most people don't know the rules exist, but there's opportunities that rich, sophisticated investors can access, which most Westerners can't access. They've just relaxed some of these rules in the States, which was quite encouraging. But like for people in Australia, you know, where I imagine a lot of your listeners are, you can't access certain opportunities because you don't have enough privilege to be able to access, you know, those opportunities. And these might not be rules that are in your face each day, but they impact you from an experience level, and you can't even see. It's just experienced as frustration to you, you know.
So when I listen to that, though, just around particularly say the story of a female in a country where she can't have a bank account and therefore, you know, can't transfer money freely. So is it correct that cryptocurrency, all that we need to be able to send crypto or receive crypto is what? An internet access?
Yeah, pretty much.
Is that all we need? And so for someone listening,
$50.
Where does the money sit? Is it, I know it's not money, and I probably need to use a different word. Where does the cryptocurrency sit, and what can they buy with it?
Yeah. Okay. So where it sits is it's called cryptocurrency because that comes from the word cryptographic, right? And so cryptographic, like security, is how this thing is secured. So literally the money, it's literally a two-key system. So if you imagine a safe and there's a big key that just hangs on a hook on the wall that like anyone can grab, that's one of the two keys. That's your public key in a crypto situation. And then you have one key, which is like the manager's key at a bank vault, right?
Yeah.
And then like you need to get the manager over. And so the key for you, the second key, which is called your private key, is basically what stores all of your money. And literally the private key shows up in literally a list of 12 or 24 words. It's called a seed phrase. And so literally these words make up a puzzle that if you have that key with the other key, you can turn the lock and you can move the money, right? This two system. But the problem with cryptocurrency simultaneously is if you have those words and you lose those words, then your money might be vamoosed. Like you might not be able to ever access it again. So this is the process of becoming self-sovereign, meaning ruling over your own affairs, like truly being in charge of what it is you're doing, which means you're also in charge of security. You're in charge of redundancies. You're in charge of the whole banking system for yourself. And there is technology coming that will help solve all of those problems that come with that as well. But yeah, like it's literally stored in a bunch of words in answer to your question. Where to spend it was the second part of the question. The answer is there's lots of solutions, especially for Westerners, like My Crypto Cards and Revolut and all sorts of things where you can just literally like tap and go like you would with other payment solutions in a lot of different ways. So you can get Visa cards that can connect to your account, all these kind of things. But it's not necessarily practical. Like no one wants to buy their groceries with Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin goes up and down like 20% of the day. Like if I was going to say I was saving for a car, right? I wanted to buy a new car and I needed to save 20 grand. Bitcoin, and I needed to do it like in a couple of months or whatever, right? Bitcoin might not be a good solution because if I saved it into that container in 2 months' time, I might have enough money for 2 cars, or I might have enough money for a push bike and
a quarter of a car, half a car. Yeah.
Like it's volatile.
Right. So this is the thing. So so I see your point. But then why is that the case when, I suppose if I take that comparison, because that's interesting. So I'm going to two-phase question. First question really quick is, what is Bitcoin in distinction to cryptocurrency? Is Bitcoin cryptocurrency, or is cryptocurrency Bitcoin, or do you know what I'm saying? Is it an animal in the zoo, but there's other animals in the zoo, or?
Yeah, totally. Like Bitcoin's very similar to some of the very first computers you would have seen that taken up like whole rooms. It's very early technology. It was the first iteration of what is possible in regards to this. Some people say that it solved the problem of creating like a digital gold. That's how some people like to think of it. And gold's a volatile asset too. Like gold goes up and down in price. Relatively volatile compared to say like $1 in your bank account. Like it's pretty stable. So it's like this digital gold is kind of like how people relate to it, and it's kind of dumb because it's not gold at all. We didn't physically take it out of the ground, or and it kind of like set the scene for what is possible to have this like limited resource in this infinite world. But the interesting thing to me now is becoming more relevant cryptocurrency right now, because we've gone through a wave in the last 18 months of where Bitcoin was the thing that was traded the most, to more recently we've had the volume per day out trump Bitcoin for like, I'm not sure how long it is right now, but it feels like a year, where stable coins like Tether and DAI and all these USDC, which are one of these coins equals $1, the volume of those has gone through the roof. And it's been the thing that's being used the most because people don't want to store, transactional wealth in like a volatile asset. It doesn't make sense.
Well, so I suppose that's my question then. So is it true to say that Bitcoin is one of many cryptocurrencies, but it was the first?
Yeah. There's literally like 7,500 cryptocurrencies already.
Okay, so 7,500 cryptocurrencies. So when we're talking about cryptocurrencies, you're not, just so people listening, we're not talking about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just one of. The same way that if we were talking about the companies listed on, the stock exchange, you can't say...
there's ASX, and then there's like Telstra is one on the ASX.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just one of the many. And then, because then the next question is, you just said, you don't want to store your money in Bitcoin. So at the moment, my money might be in a bank, right? And I live in Australia, so it happens to be stored in Australian dollars, but that does on a global exchange go up and down relative to something else. Yeah. And yet when I go and shop for my food, or I go and pay my bills, or whatever it is I do with my money, I'm not thinking in that moment, what is this worth in relativity to something else? So I'm just curious, if I'm buying things in Bitcoin and my Bitcoin's gone up and down, Did you get my question? Like why is it more volatile than a dollar if I'm buying things in Bitcoin?
So the practical way to think about this is to think, right, okay, so Bitcoin, obviously it goes up and down, it's wild, but over the longer term, it seems to be traveling in an upwards direction. Like the social contract of it being digital gold is getting more bedded into society. It appears to be real, right? So it may be good as a part of your long-term wealth bucket, right? We think about it in terms of like two buckets. You've got your like your income and your transactions and your grocery bill, and you've got your long-term wealth and your investments and your building of everything, right? It works fine, Bitcoin, in like a long-term kind of perspective and a long-term thinking, but you wouldn't want to use it in your daily, going about life. So you can kind of separate your income and your growth worlds and clean your finances up a little bit with that.
So Bitcoin could be an investment bucket, but then what about other cryptocurrencies? Could they be something you could use? Like, I suppose my question is, I see in society at the moment, there is a very strong push, and, I think COVID is a catalyst for it intentionally, if I just call it, for us to become a cashless society. And I think that's, and again, I don't know nearly as much as you or many people about world economics, but I think if you've gone and been really irresponsible and overprinted money, the easiest way for no one to really notice that is to take all the money out of the market and make it impossible to use dollars. And so then, I can't even go to the local coffee shop now and pay with cash. They don't take cash anymore, and I think that's being put as, quote unquote, a health issue because everyone's afraid to touch everything at the moment. But I see a bigger picture behind that. And I really think that that's just where it's starting, but it won't go back. We're not going to go back to them taking cash. They're just going to, make it a cashless society. So my question then becomes, well, that's fine. If we're a completely digital currency still in the realm of the Australian dollar or the US dollar, some people will go, well, that's fine. That's neat and tidy. We all have our phones. We can all just pay for things. But then the bigger question for me is, well, what if the internet goes down? Do you know what I mean? Like if we're a digital, and that would be true for crypto, but I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts around us being a cashless society? Is that a good thing for us? And then how does, at least I feel, so my brain, if I can just finish my stream of thought, because my brain does go weird places. So I'm happy to admit this might just seem like, why does Marina think these things? But I'm like, okay, so if there's no cash, and then eventually cash just ceases to exist, and my money's digital. First of all, if the bank even has a glitch and just deletes all of the, the zeros or all of the numbers that exist in my account, I'm kind of screwed. Or if the internet has an issue, or if 5G comes in and just literally melts it all, I don't know. And then part of me is like, well, if I had a cryptocurrency account, at least when the internet comes back up or does whatever, like you said, I'm a self-sovereignty coach. So to me, I'm like, well, I can go and access, it's like my own little bank as opposed to me relying on this institution doing the right thing. So do these things play hand in hand if we're talking about in future there being a cashless society?
Yes, I have many thoughts on this, and I might go on an equally slightly messy diatribe.
Did you think that was messy? Pardon me. Okay, fair call. You can go on a messy little wander if you like.
The thought around this is like, this is about, we're talking about a pretty doomsday situation. Like we're talking about like the phones go down, the internet goes down, everything's gone. Yeah, like, like if we're trying to plan or prepare for that, then even if it was crypto or banking or cash or gold, we don't really know. So we probably want a little bit in each bucket, like we really want to think about it in terms of redundancies and think like, okay, one backup's not enough anymore. Maybe I need 2 backups or 3 backups in the world we live in today. So for certainty and safety and feeling secure, maybe it's good to just hedge against a little bit of everything right now and not be too much in any one of the buckets. Like I spend all of my existence inside of crypto from my career and all this sort of stuff, but I'm definitely not, I don't have it on a pedestal. It's really functional. It's going to be a great technology that's going to accelerate things. And like, when the rubber meets the road and I don't know, something something blows up or something happens in your world, you might need some silver coins to pay your rent, or you might need to have some cash or whatever. A little bit to back up a second though, is we've experienced some of this already. Like we've seen like CBA or like the Commonwealth Bank go down, or the National Australia Bank go down in Australia. And we've seen these things, like recently, I think CBA went down, where someone was in Melbourne and it was lockdowns, and they're like, I'm a mother with this many kids, CBA just went down, I don't have any other banking solution, I can't buy dinner, it's like takeaway night, my kids are literally, there's no food in the house, my kids are not going to eat tonight. And I think people need to make sure that they don't put themselves in that situation. Like one bank is not safe enough anymore if you've got banking. Like I would have a couple of things, like, you know, like
it's interesting, isn't it? Because this is kind of the world we live in at the moment, I think, where, you know, in the past perhaps people have looked at crypto and gone, oh, risky, you know, like the safe money's in fiat currency or money. But now we're in a reality, as you just suggested, where maybe one bank isn't enough, and maybe you need to be in stocks, and you need to be in gold and silver, and you need, you know, and again, some people who are listening are like, Marina, I can't even say $50. So this all just sounds, you know, a week. So this is all wonderful for people who have lots of money. But I just think that particularly those people who let's say there's people out there, let's run some categories of people and just see how crypto could support them. So let's say we've got people who've got lots of assets, you know, maybe they've got, you know, the house they live in where they've paid off their mortgage, maybe they have an investment property, maybe they're on a good wicket, even in COVID, they haven't had their income affected. Does that individual, do you see a place for an awareness of an investment in crypto playing out for them?
Yeah, totally. So the biggest problem with a house right now as an asset, say, is the liquidity event. If you know, poop hits the fan, you know, if that happens, it takes a hot minute to sell a house, you know, like days on market. The market all seems pretty good at the moment, but it can take a hot minute if things get really bad. So the liquidity event for someone who owns real estate is very slow. The crypto world can fix that very quickly. So we have a bunch of different projects. There's a really cool Australian project called Concrete that's actually made it so you can like get a mortgage over your house with a blockchain mortgage over your house, so that you can spend you know your house if you need to in a bunch of different ways. So there's some exciting innovations coming there. Also, like especially in property, like this individual has got investment properties. I don't know if they're a developer or whatever, but a lot of regulation around getting leverage over property in order to get more loans. You know, you've probably seen like a property investor gets to a point where they build a portfolio and then the bank goes, it doesn't matter that you've got all this money coming in from tenants, your job doesn't earn enough to then have a bigger loan. Crypto solves that. It just straight up looks at the value of the asset, and you might be able to get loans much quicker as a result based on the cash flow and the deal itself. So it doesn't discriminate against like what your wage is. Like the system's kind of like tapped because of over regulations in a bunch of points.
The traditional system, you mean?
Yeah. Like, and a lot of these measures were put there as protective measures. Yeah. So, you know, crypto is super nascent, and you know, you've got to make sure that you're not making bets you can't recover from in crypto, right? Like it's super, like things can still break. It's early, right? It's like buying a computer. Like your computer might, you know, die. Like so you can't have all your eggs in one basket, and you can't take bets that you can't recover from. But that's getting less and less true that crypto is not safe. Like it's getting much safer day by day from the standpoint that it doesn't have the volatility with things like stablecoins. Like I can plan and prepare if $1 equals $1. I can prepare and plan with that. You know, like I can think about life and what's coming. I'm not sure if I answered.
No, that's fine. Yeah. So basically what I'm hearing you say is that cryptocurrency isn't just about a digital stock market, essentially, you know, because that's what I'm hearing when we talk about Bitcoin and the $7,500 different cryptocurrencies. To me, they sound like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but just for my mind to do that parallel that it likes to do, it's kind of like going on to the stock exchange and putting money on a quote unquote coin or a currency, and then hoping it'll go up or down, and then using it to trade into other things. Like, it's a way of creating wealth potentially. But I just heard, sorry.
See it when they first come in. Like, that's what they see first. It's like,
yes.
Look at this cryptocurrency and what it's worth, but it's not what it is.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to finish saying there, is I think that initially that's what I kind of thought it was, but what you're really saying is there's actually applications for currency, kind of more like if we look at, instead of money, we look at the financial realm around money, like brokering and investing and lending and fundraising potentially, because my understanding of crypto is actually initially that it had a lot of kind of social consciousness, if you will, in its like early iterations. Like, that's kind of one of the big things that it was about, as you say, self-sovereignty and freedom and access for all. So how does that play in?
So it is definitely, like, you hit the nail on the head. It's definitely applications, it's technology. It's essentially like crypto is doing everything that fintech or financial technology is promised to do. Like, it's giving you the ability to be creative with the way in which things are done. It's kind of the building blocks. In the niche that I'm like really tightly in, which is called DeFi, which stands for decentralized finance. They refer to it as money Legos. Like, you're building these different little applications that you can kind of stack together and make all these weird and wonderful things that can do all sorts of random stuff.
Yeah.
And so the money Legos mean is quite accurate. Like, a lot of those coins you see in the market have a function and a thing they can do, and you can plug them into another one, and then you've got two functions that are happening, and then you can kind of like, make these little crazy concoctions of finance products that you couldn't do in a normal system. Like, I couldn't, in a normal system, in the normal banking system, I can't go down to Coles and buy my groceries with my house and then get in my car and drive my car home, and then my car is like an automated driverless car, and my car goes back out and goes to work and earns a wage while I go inside and unpack my groceries. Like, that's a crypto world. Like, that's a decentralized technologies kind of world. All of those functions that would need to happen in order to make that happen are possible thanks to crypto stuff. And it's like very futuristic, super crazy. Like, there's all sorts of applications to it,
Yeah. And I wonder too, if I was listening to this podcast, if maybe I would have already tapped out because it sounds, again, scary or heavy or big or confusing. So then let's just say someone's like, all right, I've stuck this out, but what the hell do I do? So let's say, maybe I'm not even someone with all those assets mentioned before. I'm someone who maybe can save $50 a week, especially in the current economic climate where lots of people are on reduced money, sometimes at the moment just from the government, right, with JobKeeper or whatnot. So let's look at someone who doesn't have a lot of money, but they want to learn about crypto. They want to test the waters. They want to, really dive in and get a kind of their hands on that clay and get the functionality of it. So what's like the 3 steps to getting started, or what do they do? So I don't know anything about crypto. I haven't put a dollar into the market, but I'm curious. I hear what you're saying. It's coming. How do I get educated? How do I get started? And what mistakes do I make sure I definitely don't do?
Sure. Cool. I mean, the simplest function I would recommend people go on the journey of, and even if you're one of those people that I said, should put 1 to 2% attention on this and it's not your whole world or whatever, they should go through the process of buying some of these stable coins, because they are really the future of where this thing's going. So you don't have a lot of volatility or whatever. You should go through the process of buying them. So the way you do that is you get like an exchange account with like a Binance, for example, in that works pretty much everywhere in the world, or you could use Coinbase or whatever, like an exchange account. So you get an account with one of these people that you can send money to, like Australian dollars to, and they turn it into these stable coins, right?
Okay, so just to pause again, because I want this to be really simple. What you're saying is they go to essentially, is it incorrect to call this like a brokerage site or
exchange?
An exchange. So the same way that if I wanted to buy anything, I like on the regular stock market, I need someone to transact that for me. So this is an exchange where I bring my money, and the exchange, you just said Binance, Coin, well, you didn't say CoinSpot, but that's one, isn't it? And
CoinSpot's another one. Coinbase is like large ones, yeah.
What is your recommendation? Like, do you, I know, I don't think you're affiliated with any, I'm not sure, but if someone's like, okay, but which one? Like, what would you say? Look, this is really user-friendly. It's got good rates. I don't know, like just give your recommendation, knowing guys that this is Roscoe's recommendation. You have to do your own research, but what would you say to make it easy for them?
I'm going to make my recommendation based on the fees. So the best fees right now is Binance for Australia. You can transfer it from 0% in using the Pay ID transfer. So like if you've got that Roscoe banking system in your bank, you know, and you can type in a Pay ID, then you can use that. They're not all perfect. Not all exchanges are perfect and whatever, and they've got different user experiences. That recommendation will work in most of the world too for the listeners that are outside of Australia. Yeah, so basically you go and you put some of these Aussie dollars into this Binance thing. They give you some stable coins. The next step is you've got to get it off the exchange, and you need to get it back into your own wallet, because when it's on the exchange, those little 12 or 24 words I was talking about before, you don't own them in that moment. They're in the exchange's wallet, so you've got to get them back out. You've got to withdraw it from there and put it back into your wallet. So that's the next step, is withdrawing it to your own wallet. So you've got the money now in a wallet that you control. And so if you don't have one of those yet, you can get something like Exodus or MetaMask. These are wallets that are like used a lot. And if you get one of those wallets and you withdraw it to those wallets, you can then start to do things with these stable coins. So like first things first is you can also buy, of course, Bitcoin as well if you want to like do some long-term savings or whatever. Like there's other coins, right? But to keep it simple, I think a really cool idea for people right now is to get on an exchange, buy some of these stable coins, get it into their wallet, and then once they've got it in their wallet, they can start earning with it. And so they can earn like 6 to 8% per annum on their stable coins.
How do they earn money with it in their wallet?
Yeah, so it's a pretty safe and secure way. It's a relatively old idea, how it works, but I'll explain how it works, but you don't need to know how it works in order to do it, okay? Just like first things first, people listening to the like, okay, these are the steps. So the steps are put some money in the exchange, get it in my wallet, and then earn some interest, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so the way in which they do that is they'll put it onto a website like compound.finance or something like that, right? Some type of lending and borrowing platform. And what they're doing in that moment is they're actually lending their money to someone else. Now, that might sound all dangerous and scary and whatever, but the way in which they're doing it is ultra safe and secure, in my opinion, because the way they're lending someone money is into, they put it into this little piece of code, and in this little piece of code, the other person that's borrowing off them has to put assets into that little piece of code too. So if they don't repay the loan, the assets they put in the contract get liquidated and sent back to you. So there's always more money in the pot than what you're lending out. So it's what's called, it's a technical term, it's over collateralized. There's no sort of like, there's no simple way to say it. I wish there was better language. But yeah, like you basically like pawnbroking is the best example of it. Like I have these Sennheiser headphones, right? They're worth $500 or $600.
Yep.
If I went down to the pawnbroker and handed this over the counter, he'd probably give me a $50 cash loan. If I didn't come back and pay him the $50 back, he could sell my headphones and he would have more money, so he'd be fine, right? So we lend these stable coins, and people put in their crypto assets, and we do it in a way that's safe and secure so we can earn a good return without a bank being in the middle.
Cool. So then just to understand, I like the pawnbroker, pawn shop metaphor, but how then, say the person who is putting in more collateral or more assets than the money that they're borrowing from you, how do they make money? So they just happen to be asset rich, and then they take that money, invest it, and get more assets? Like, just to understand it, because I think it's good to understand both sides, to go, okay, cool, now I see how they're making money, therefore how they can pay me 6 to 8%. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, so they're typically traders. So they're typically like traders. And so they put things like, wrapped versions of Bitcoin or Ethereum into these smart contracts because they want to increase the number of Bitcoin they hold. They don't want to increase the number of US dollars they hold. Yeah. So they have a different end game to earning like a safe and stable return. That's not their end game. They're in trading and they want to earn Bitcoin. That's what they want to do, and they've learned that art, which is a great art too. Like, I mean, for if there's anyone happens to be listening to this that's a trader, this is a great way for you to leverage your coins without having to sell them down in order to have a trading pot of revenue each day. So it can be really good on that side as well.
And this might again be a silly question, but then how if they're putting in more collateral or more assets into that pot and they've taken, say, my investment, how is it not better for them just to invest with the bigger collateral they just put in? Do you know what I mean? Like when they get more return on the more money that they have?
So in trading, typically you only trade 1% to 3% of your portfolio at any given time. Mm-hmm. Like you don't more than 1% to 3% of your entire portfolio in trading. So them leveraging the capital makes a lot more sense to them because of Bitcoin's volatile price. Like at the end of the day, they just want to be net positive on Bitcoin. They don't care about the US dollar movement. That's not their goal. So the answer to that question is like, it makes more sense to them because they actually are lowering their risk by taking a very small loan against a very big asset.
Okay. So then, so people go on to an exchange, they register, they put some Australian dollar or whatever currency they're from dollar in, they then purchase some coins, they then take the coins into their wallet. And that could either be a digital wallet or like a hard asset wallet. Is that right? Like a US, just for anyone listening, it could, like, I know a Trezor looks a bit like a USB stick kind of thing. And then once it's in there, can I ask then if someone's like, oh, this does sound good, what you just said, because I'm sure there's lots of people out there who'd be happy with 6 to 8% return, particularly in the current situation. But let's say they didn't want to do that because they're like, oh, that just feels a bit too wiggy. If they just bought good coins now or good currency now, knowing that, as you've said, you potentially there's going to be more people entering this marketplace and Bitcoin and all of this stuff, and especially as we go more cashless, is it possible that simply just buying at the moment and holding over time could be in and of itself a good investment?
I was listening to a podcast this morning that noted that the reason why economists were created is to make astrologers look more accurate, because basically what I'm saying is anytime you make a call on any of these things, you're going to be right and wrong. Like there's no perfect science to picking these coins and knowing what's going to be better or worse over the long term unless you understand them from the inside out. So I don't really have like any hot tips per se. I like there's again, like, to stay like as simple as possible with this. There's all sorts of new cool tools that are coming out right now. For example, there's this thing called token sets, right? Where I can get like the exposure to like something like Ethereum, which I think is a good coin long-term personally. I could be right, I could be wrong about it. Yesterday, I posted on Facebook and said I think it's undervalued, but I could be right or wrong about that, who knows. There's this super cool thing called a token set where I can buy Ethereum in a token set, and it can rebalance to a stable coin when the market is going down and rebalance to Ethereum when it's going up, but it's still, of course, just a strategy that's volatile and it may or may not work. So but
sounds like a token coin sounds like a shapeshifter.
Yeah.
There's
so many. Well, literally in the last 48 to 72 hours, we had like this project called Sushi Swap come out, and we have like Uniswap, which is like unicorn swap. We have all these different weird memes in the crypto space all the time. Like,
to be honest, sometimes I know in the past when I kind of looked at it, I was like, is this just really where like all the team, and I don't mean this to sound at all sexist, but I'm like, where all the what's the word I'm trying to say? It just sounds like all the techie coding teenage like boys just go on, and girls, I'm sure, and just have a good old time creating stuff that none of us really understand. But they get to just have it's like play out all their kind of wannabe fantasies in this digital platform.
Right. Yeah, totally. They're definitely playing. And the reason they play, and this is something we learned from Silicon Valley startups, from Facebook and Instagram and, you know, Amazon and Netflix and whatever, they have this thing where they're trying to, in technology, find what's called product market fit. Yep. And they do lots of experiments in order to do that. So whilst it might look like they're playing video games right now and being silly and whatever, yep, actually what they're doing is they're just trying to express these ideas in different ways in order to see if they can get something to kind of land and drop in. And yeah, I mean, it's the same as like they would have played with Snapchat filters or whatever to create different platforms and tech. And it can all seem a little silly and fun and whatnot from afar. But heed my words, they are your future overlords, these dorks. So
yeah, I say it with admiration, and actually, you know that I'm a huge believer in, well, I mean, I think it was Einstein who said, you know, the true intellect is in imagination, and I know that everything that's been created on the progress plane in, you know, this dimension that we live in has come through play. You know, creation is play and play is creation, and you know, creation ultimately becomes commerce, as you said, if there is a good fit to the market and a need to be met and a problem to be solved. So I have full faith that whatever's ultimately there at the end of the day was some unicorn that, you know, turned into a very well-aligned, purpose-held, you know, product, right? Yeah. So that's all good. Okay, so let's just back up a bit. So people can be looking at crypto as an investment or an income-generating source. What else do they need to be aware of around, you know, the current economy, the current environment? You know, and I know we were talking before about money being printed, and am I correct in saying that we've just experienced through literally the closure of the global economy and yet the production of more money through the banks? We're probably, if they actually did, and I'm sure they are, but whether they're telling us the full picture, a full audit right now, we're in really dangerous waters around the fiat currency being even valid at the moment. Would that be true?
I think social contracts are in danger at the moment. Like if I go back to that like core of what I said money was, I think social contracts are in danger at the moment. We're seeing, you know, separation of people in a whole bunch of different physical and ideological ways. And that can breed, you know, all sorts of disdain and distrust and all sorts of problems that come out of it. But I think the exciting thing is through this is that problems are usually what it takes for someone to get off their bum in order to make something that's useful for everyone. You know, like that's the nature of humans. So I find it a super exciting time in the sense that this will get really well-intentioned people to have more grit around their money and to get more self-aware. Like, I think that's probably, you know, when you're asking me, like, with all these things going on, I was just constantly thinking while you were sort of like framing this question, I was like, it's about self-awareness. Like, especially your journey into finance or money or crypto or whatever it is, it's about self-awareness. It's about like knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, and getting stronger as a result of comprehending yourself and the world more around you.
I think that's a really valid point, Roscoe, because I think the other thing that raises is your risk, you know, your risk profile, and then equally your attachment. So what I mean by that is, you know, when I have some of these kind of heavy conversations with people, you know, who not prophesize, but essentially, you know, project forward into the future. And then they're like, oh, you know, and we could lose all our money. You know, I often say I'm really grateful for certain times in my life where I've been through really rough times financially, because what that did is it shed for me my attachment to any financial identity. You know, and as a result, I'm like, well, so long as I can feed myself, I'm good. Like, I'm genuinely good. You know, I don't need the flash car. I don't need the fancy house. I don't really need those things to feel safe at night, but there are people who do. And I think that's a whole conversation someone gets to have with themselves as we look down the barrel of, as you propose, potentially a lot of problems, but also a lot of new solutions. And so as you look at these new solutions, the question is, what do I feel comfortable with on a risk profile? What kind of meets my values? What am I supporting in the world? Do I want to kind of back something that maybe is not in alignment with my morals, right? But could give me a good return. Like those things also need to play into it. So if you were going to speak into that side of things, what do you think when we're talking about this self-awareness of you as the sovereign individual, looking at all the options on the table, what would be like the top 3 things that they need to delve into within themselves to make considered decisions about where to put their money, or even, you know, how they relate to money and finances?
So I have something tactical that I'll share after kind of like this ideological sort of thought process on it first.
Yep.
From an ideological standpoint, it'd be really good for you to like go, okay, what wouldn't I do for money? And then look at the shadow of that.
Just pause a second. That's a big ass question. What wouldn't I do for money? Because I please don't lose your train of thought, but I just want to have that land. If everyone can just really sit with that question, because so often we go, oh, I wouldn't do that for money. And it's like, but how much money is the next point, right? Because there's like that saying, everyone's got a price. And I really think that's something people should explore, because we often think, oh, I would never do what they did, or I'd never do that, or I don't ever want that to happen. But at what cost, right? Or at what avoidance of what price point, et cetera, et cetera. So that's huge. Yeah. So.
And there's certain things you wouldn't do for no amount of money in the world. Like I wouldn't compromise my children for no amount of money in the world. You know, like so it's an interesting question, but the other side of the question to me is, what's like the shadow of that, or what are you resisting? Like you can get quite a question. Because you say, no, I wouldn't do that. And that actually might show up what it is that you're resisting, and could actually be holding you back from bringing in a whole world of wealth. Like, so there's some interesting self-discovery stuff. And I know you can help people with that self-discovery process that get out of, you know, talking through these kind of things with you. The tactical thing I have is counterintuitive. So the tactical thing I'd have is if you're a bit of a gambler and you like to take a bet, and your risk profile is you love risk, like if you fill out the form and it says what's your risk tolerance and you go I love it, then that's the answer you put in the form. Bring
the risk.
I would suggest that for the next 12 months, you go on the complete opposite journey and you find the least risky things to do, and you find the most systematic way and the most boring way to grow wealth. And vice versa. If you are totally risk adverse and you never take risk, I would recommend you taking a tiny fraction of your wealth. Like say you're risk adverse and you've saved every penny you've ever had, and you've got like 400 grand in the bank or whatever, and you've saved for 30 years or whatever it is, right? Take 5 grand, and I want that person to go and be as risky as they can and try and make money, right? Not just not go to the casino and put it on black. Yeah. But start to diversify. And basically what I'm saying is look at who you are, look at the self-awareness, and learn more about who you are so that you can get wealthier for a longer term period of time. You know?
I love what you just shared so much, because it really speaks into, as you just mentioned, a lot of the work I do, which is the wholeness piece, right? So if there's a part of yourself you've not quote unquote allowed, or you've left it dormant or made it wrong in some way, and you're super strong in your quote unquote rightness or way of being, then our agility, which is more important than stability, especially in times of change, which we're coming into, our agility lies in our muscles' ability to flex the full range. So I love what you're saying there. That's like actually genius, because if you can get comfortable, and this comes back to, you know, physical training, comfortable in that uncomfortable muscular range of being, you know, a rebel with risk versus being super strong on your boundaries and your rules, because that would be the counter for the person who's normally risk, right? That's going to make you a much stronger player in any game. So that's actually like brilliant. I love that. And notice also, I'm just going to call this out for anyone who's like has immediate resistance to that. Like, I don't want to do it that way. I want to, like, the rebel wants to make all the money, and the, you know, the saver's like, you know, stuff that idea. I don't want to lose any money. That in and of itself is speaking right into the massive opportunity that's sitting there for you to become a better investor, or ultimately just more dynamic in your life as a whole, like a player in your life. That's brilliant advice. I love that. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well, as we kind of start to wrap up, I would just like to ask you some rapid fire questions. So, you know, as someone who, you know, loves computers and loves crypto, I know you're still, you know, a human, you've got, you know, 3 kids, and you're someone who likes to live life fully. So what would be your number one suggestion right now in this current environment to elevate health or energy?
Routine. So I have a morning routine, an evening routine, and a weekly routine. Definitely, it's incredible. Like, I have, you know, I have things that I do on every Sunday and Thursday each week. You know, like I have, so I have like practical things like my exercise. You know, I exercise twice a day. Like routine is like, you know, just going to support you.
It's funny because this is coming up a bit in a few of, you know, different ways around me through social media. I see a lot of people talking about structure and routine and how it ultimately frees you. Whereas often the people who like a lot of freedom resist routine. And I always share the story of when I had my girls, and people said, oh, are you going to put them on a routine? And I was like, nah, that would just, you know, my life's too hectic for that. And then I ended up routining my kids, you know, literally to the bloody hour. I followed this book like a manual, I remember. But my children, and everybody's free to parent as they choose to parent. My children thrived. And what I realized is that structure gave me freedom, because dad could take care of them, mom could take care of them. And literally, I remember dad would tell stories of Harlow walking up to him and like with her bottle kind of going, it's feed time now, because she was just used to her routine. And he'd be like, this is the easiest kid to look after. So I agree with you. It's funny. It's like a contradiction in terms that routine does give us, and you know, we like variety too, but I agree with you, particularly around health principles or purpose, you know, and what you want to be and do in life. Routine's amazing. So one of your favorite things in your morning routine, what would you share?
I mean, my favorite thing is my coffee.
Well, that's going to give you energy, so that definitely ticks the box. Do you know how many people I hear say that? They're like, honestly, Marina, I love my coffee. Like, I love it.
Yeah, I do.
That's hilarious. Okay. And then what would you say for people who want to experience today, or the you know, the low hanging fruit for empowerment? What would be your number one tip for empowerment, more empowerment?
Number one tip for empowerment would probably be to microdose psilocybin mushrooms. That would be my number one tip.
Say that again, microdose
psilocybin mushrooms.
Because?
I think that the role that they do is quite interesting. I think that it rebalances the emotional, spiritual, and mental bodies back together. Physical body even, like. I think that there's just, I really like, if you haven't already checked it out, there's this thing called the stoned ape thesis by Terence McKenna, who basically theorizes that we became humans from the ape species by eating psychedelic mushrooms and our frontal lobes forming.
Wow.
So that's basically kind of the thesis. And yeah, a lot of incredibly smart people do psychedelics.
I know microdosing is a huge trend, right? And it's not just mushrooms.
Definitely not legal in Australia, so you shouldn't do it in Australia.
That's right. Don't, well, whatever. Yeah. You make your own choices, people. You do you. That's always my message. You know, it's funny, actually, that kind of leads a little bit to just as a little segue, you know, I think we live in a society right now where it's like, oh, I've been told I'm not allowed, right? Like legally, right now, especially more than ever. You know, we're literally told you can't do that. That's wrong. I mean, I just heard, I haven't seen it because I'm not on social media a lot, but by choice these days, you know, that a pregnant woman was arrested in Melbourne because she posted about a protest or something. I don't know anything about it except I heard that. And I was like, how are we standing by when this is a huge violation of human rights to post? My first reaction, I mean, there may be more to the story, of course, but that's my first reaction. I'm like, I just feel like we are in this very much do as we're, well, literally that's been the conditioning, right, of our societal structure. Go to school, learn to sit, be told what to do, and do as we're told. And yesterday, my daughter, who is 10, so I'm sharing this, and if you listen and you're in judgment of my thoughts around this, that's cool. I'm good with it. So just notice what you're making it mean for yourself. But my daughter Bayla is like an amazing dancer. In fact, it's one of the few things in her life that gives her super confidence. Like doing it just makes her, she lights up, and she's really good. So she's actually been on TikTok with my permission since before it was TikTok, because it was a dance platform. She TikToks nonstop all day long. And I'm happy with it because it's physical movement, you know? Anyway, and school called her in yesterday and was like, you know, unless you're 12, it's illegal to be on TikTok, and no one should be on TikTok unless they're 12. And then she came home and she's like, Mom, I'm really upset because I can't go on TikTok anymore. And I said, why can't you go on TikTok anymore? And she said, because the school says it's illegal. And it made me think about this structure of what we're told is okay and not okay. And as you just said, mushrooms are not illegal in Australia, and, you know, CBD oil is not illegal in Australia. And yet you go to LA and CBD oil is everywhere. Now, I'm not weighing in on any one of these things, but it's interesting to note that a law in one country is not a law in another country. And at what point, and you know, this is my big piece, do we as a self-sovereign soul get to choose our own rules for ourselves? And I think we just need to do that more and more, because we do have that tendency to just knee-jerk reaction. Oh, we're not allowed to do that, so don't. Or if you do, don't tell anyone. And then therein lies the danger of inviting or not inviting other people to explore that they can also rebel against the rules.
Yeah. I mean, the cheesy anecdotal thing to say is that, you know, become your own ruler, you know, and the thing that the pathway to that is not necessarily linear for all people, but one of the linear parts to the pathway of becoming your own ruler, especially in the world of money and finance, and rules like being able to, as a 10-year-old, to have a bank account without mummy or daddy signing for it, right? Same, right? The choice you've got to make is it illegal or is it not? And the way you make that choice is you've got to kind of look in and you've got to dig into these things, you've got to research them, and you've got to have a thirst for knowledge around this stuff. Because the factualness of whether it's illegal for her to do it or not is very subjective and extremely questionable. So like on the basis of law and like my comprehension around it, she can do it in my experience. So it's like, it's subjective, and this is like social contracts again playing in, right? Law is another social contract.
You know, and something that I'm really big on teaching my children, and I'm actually, not even my children, my clients, I'm a big stand for it, is this questioning mind, to stay in the question, right? And I think we as a society tend to want to fixate on a certainty of right or left, up or down. You know, we want to polarize to one end of the paradox, but the truth is that every time we try to, you know, the more we think we know, the paradox proves the less we know for sure. So if we're really seeking truth, and, you know, I've always said to my girls, you know, there's ethics and there's morality, but the one person you have to go to bed with every night is yourself. And so if you're good with your decisions from a place of love and you know, your heart space, that's it. Like, and that's what I feel is missing in our society right now. And it really does stress me a little at the moment, Roscoe, if I'm honest, is that I feel that we have numbed down, switched off from that internal compass of quote unquote, when I say right, I don't mean right and wrong. I mean right as in highest expression of what is good for all, you know, what is true. I feel like we've dumbed down that rudder or that compass in favor of like an external ruling voice, right? Which we've done for years in lots of different ways, but now on this mass level, we're doing it. And I find it so uncomfortable to witness. I don't know if you can relate to that.
Well, I mean, people are trading their liberties for comforts.
Yeah. Well, and I think for security of, when I say belonging, you know, I mean, just not being smeared social, like not being arrested in your house, for goodness sake, you know. Anyway, we could go on a whole nother, I could honestly talk for about 4 hours about stuff for a minute. I'm going to zip my mouth, but I have one last little request for you. If you could, you know, in your life now, and it doesn't have to be about crypto, but you know, you've had your journey, you've had your, you know, awakenings, you've had your, I'm sure, breakdowns and your breakthroughs. So if we were to put a little message from Roscoe, a one-liner or something into a bottle, and it was shipped out to everyone in the world, or you're a techie person, so let's say we put a little voice note that gets sent to everyone and everyone gets to listen to it, and it's your final words, it's all they hear from you, what would be the summation, or what would you be like, hey humans, listen up, this is important, and then you just laid it on the line?
You can, like, if I had to put a billboard to the universe with a message, it'd probably just be like, you can't have too much perspective.
I'm going to put, that actually really hit me, because I actually love that, but I'm going to ask you, do you feel that's true, that you can't have too much perspective?
Yeah, I think it's accurate.
Okay, that's good. I'm just wanted to test that with you, because I feel that's true, and I feel sometimes I get criticized for constantly seeking. I'm always seeking more and more perspectives, but as a coach, that's what we're trained to do, right? It's like know more of the map, because then you're less attached to one perspective. And I mean, to be honest, I think that's literally the biggest limiter of all of us, individually and collectively, is the perspective frame is so small, sometimes painfully small, right? When you look externally on someone who is seeking help or desiring change, that's actually really amazing. You can never have too much perspective. That's brilliant. Yeah, well, on that note, I don't know, that's a mic drop moment right there. That just nailed it for me. And if anyone has any questions about what that means, yeah, you know, when you're hearing this, you know, tag Roscoe. We'll link to obviously Roscoe's websites, his social media. You can connect with him. I know that he does, like you've done tours of Australia to educate people about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and what's coming, and how to monetize and make wealth in that space. And I know that you're very passionate. I also know you have a lot of new technologies that you're working on and developing, and people can reach out to you if they want to learn more, right? That's what you do.
I'm a real human being. Like, send me a message, say hi.
Yeah.
Like, there's no funnel for you to go to. There's no
connect.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today. And I do hope that we've shed a bit of light on this very important kind of technology. You know, and like you said, and what I love about what you mostly said today is it's actually all exciting, and it's actually all opportunity, and we don't need to be afraid of it. But it would maybe be a good idea to start wading into these waters if that tide is rising anyway.
Totally, 100%. Yeah, there's no harm in playing with this new tech. There's no harm in just messing around with it. Have some fun.
Yeah. All right, Roscoe, I adore you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, they can reach out, let us know their takeaways, and of course, share, like, all the things of this podcast.
Cool. Thanks, guys.